How are you?
I'm doing incredibly well. I always forget you're not German, but you work at a German
Yes,
firm, and I'm like, oh, great! Like, here's the American accent.
exactly. No, I've gotten like Hannah, but it's usually, yeah. I mean, Hannah, Filipino American from California, moved here a couple years back. And I think I should have improved my German a bit better, but probably getting there
How do you
soon enough, I
pronounce
hope.
how do you pronounce Vowerk Ventures? Because I butcher it every single time.
Yes. So Vowerk Ventures in German is
Vorwach,
sort of
Vorwach,
exactly right,
Vorwach,
exactly.
like
It's
for
memorable.
work.
So exactly, exactly. I always say it's memorable as an icebreaker to, kind of give people, preempt people how to properly pronounce it, the German route, or for the non-German route, really, Vorwerk. So hopefully that is memorable enough for others.
What's a sunny Californian doing in the middle of Germany?
Also, another question I usually get asked in the beginning. I would say typically, so the reason for Berlin, essentially, my husband's from Germany. So that is sort of the main reason as well. But he's been in the States for over a decade. And I think we kind of jokingly say quarter midlife crisis or something post COVID times, wanted to, change scenery from New York City. And then we thought, the sort of up and coming tech hub within Europe is in Berlin. And we sort of kind of picked that versus, I suppose, London, Paris, of course, other great hubs. But yeah, sort of, I think he missed a bit of the little cultural things like getting, I don't know, fresh Brötchen in the morning or something, which is very hard to get in New York City. But that's the
Don't you
reason,
guys have
really.
like a billion bakeries
Yeah,
and
I
coffee
suppose
shops
love.
and bodegas that you can go to instead?
Sure, but I guess not the German type. So I do want to say, emphasize Germans do bread really well. And I think in the US it's a bit harder. So we have, the typical Wonder Bread that you see at grocery stores. But I think in order to get really fresh European style ones, you'd have to trek to, I don't know, some places in Brooklyn or Uptown or something. But yeah, so we came to a conclusion and moved about a little bit 4 years ago.
So instead of taking the ferry to Brooklyn, you decided to uphold the entire life and move to Germany.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of, crossing the river over to Brooklyn, we're like, let's cross the pond and essentially go go towards mainland Europe.
So on this side of the pond, you're in VC, you're working for Vowerk Ventures. What is it that you like? What is your area of expertise within the context of that?
Yes. So within the fund, I mean, we do early stage investing, pre-seed to Series A. I cover mainly on the health tech side of things. And so that spans from really consumer wellness all the way to, sort of AI backend infrastructure for healthcare, amongst other things, really, but really end-to-end health, we look into that. Although what we haven't touched yet, is anything really sort of direct biotech or tech bio even, although we've sort of tinkered with those themes. But I would say within the fund, we started off on entry within digital health, and then now sort of, catered to front end patients and providers, and now also doing the back end of things.
Okay, I want to get straight into the thick of it, right? Across the show today for the last 3 hours, the theme of community has come up a lot, and it also feels like it's just the most in vogue thing at this moment in time. We've had a conversation offline about how it's potentially alpha that you've begun to understand about getting in at a very early stage and building these communities, which creates a really sticky product. Like, help flesh that out for me.
Yeah, that's actually a funny thought on community. So that's a topic I had a pretty long conversation on earlier today. And when I was thinking about it, finding what is the alpha that we can sort of point at within health and especially consumer health in general. I would actually even say a community overall. I mean, you have sort of, the early days of digital health and wearables. We've got trackers like Whoop, Oura, Apple Watch, and so forth. Now you've got the superpowers function and the likes. And I think community is a reaction, or I'd say for the new generations now, post COVID with Gen Z, Gen Alpha down the line. I think they're really, as much as we've kind of heard it probably a decent amount of times of, the loneliness epidemic with the new generation, people that are chronically online, they do crave this real, honestly, in from URL to in real life to IRL, let's say. So you've got people that, grew up chronically online, didn't have the sort of, let's say, dating scene where you have to meet someone up front, actually have to say something in person. You have the dating apps to do that. You have Instagram that now kind of transitioned into TikTok. So let's say there's always, with Gen Z, I suppose, there's always, sharing of clips or the concept of oversharing. And I think that is what they crave for, is really community in general. And I think that's what works pretty well within healthcare. Um, or rather, let's say consumer wellness. So you have these models in the US and of course also now growing here in Europe. You've let's say Third Space in London, sort
Hmm.
of luxury dream boutique. Instead of going out for a drink, you go with a cold plunge with your mates and then maybe grab a non-alcoholic drink afterwards. So there's also that sort of massive behavior change, that's a shift that's happening from how we, thought of nightlife in the past to now.
Are you doing the cold plunges and having the non-alcoholic drinks?
Yes, I have actually. Although, I mean, that is a theme that we also cover within the fund. So, sort of intersection between consumer food and health.
Hmm.
So, functional beverages. I mean, you also have in the US, the big exits with Poppy, Olipop, Liquid Death, right? And we've seen a decent amount here that are, let's say, tackling, protein is like the hot thing. So, you'll have these protein sodas popping about in London. We've seen some also here in the DACH region. But yes, I do try. I prefer to kind of take those sort of drinks maybe over Coca-Cola or something. Which I would say that's why I'm excited about it, because no one else has yet to really challenge, somebody picking up a Coca-Cola versus, let's say, a new brand here,
That's
at least from what I've seen in comparison to the
like
US.
that's such a unique. Like I've never heard it been explained like that. It's like I'm competing against Coca Cola. I'm not competing against like just another health brand. It's like I need to dethrone, or the companies need to go after. I'm not going to buy a Pepsi, a Coke, or a Sprite, or a San Pellegrino. I'm going to go get Liquid Death or a Poppy.
Exactly, exactly. And it's quite interesting with those, right? They also targeted communities. So if you think of Liquid Death, it's just water, but it's
But
a
it
tall
feels like
boy
it's like
can.
the anti algorithm. Again, it's in a can. It's so like it's so outspoken. The marketing's insane, and that's how they've built the community rather than like grassroots up. It
Exactly.
feels
And
like top down, right?
exactly. And it's a bit funny, right? Because they targeted a specific persona, which is like, I don't know, heavy metal rock fans, tall boys. Usually you'll have skaters, maybe
Hmm.
surfers, or certain enthusiasts that would pick this, but it's water at the end of the day. So it's kind of that community that then leads people to purchasing that. Then you have also Poppy that is quite colorful, Gen Z, really, great branding. And then you have also at the same time Olipop that shows the sort of classic soda pop flavors that you can then, maybe have some sort of you can derive from the taste of a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola and the likes. But I think that's what excites me about it, is that no one has been really able to topple those two big brands in general. And I think, similarly with other sectors as well that affects health, you've got also, the big tobacco industry that then has been challenged by the vaping industry. And then now there's also the new thing with Gen Z and the
You
likes
get the
of,
Zins,
what's it called?
sticking an upper decky and
Exactly.
you keep rolling. But like tobacco has always been this. I feel like today more than ever, it feels like a performance answer. It's been like
Yes. Yeah.
categorized as a performance enhancer, the same way that like caffeine is also blending into that. Like you see me drinking mate, right? And it's probably it packs so much of a punch just in a
Right.
completely different God, I'm losing the word here, but different way of like putting it in your body. It's not an instant kick. It's a really slow uphill, long tail caffeine high, but I'll drink
Exactly.
that all day versus
Right.
the caffeine kick of like this hyper performance for 20 seconds. I want that performance throughout the day. And I guess the question
Exactly.
here is how much of that is me just doing it for social status versus actually enjoying the drink? Are you seeing
Right.
some sort of narrative there? Like, are you seeing patterns within the context of that?
I mean,
Because it's not
let's
cheap
say
from like, and then maybe
no.
take away from mate. Like, let's look at Aura, let's look at Third Space, let's look at an Apple Watch. They almost feel like signaling today more than ever. Like everyone's got a Whoop and an Aura,
Exactly.
but they
Yeah.
do the same thing, kind of.
They do. And that's the thing, right? I do believe that health is a certain way of social signaling now for millennials plus Gen Z and so forth. So there's actually fun terms they have, like let's say, especially with guys. Like I feel like, you know, women are sort of the big spenders in wellness, in health in general, but then there's also men that are now the performers. This is like then you're then trying to pack in the community. So guys that would have a Whoop, that would have an Aura, that would then go to an Equinox and train for High Rocks or some Ironman marathon. So it's now this idea of um, extreme optimization. Like you have the Brian Johnsons of the world that have the luxury to do that. But then there is the other half in between that, maybe don't want to be that extreme, but are somewhat in the upper end of that. Um, and in that case, and I think it's quite exciting. And I think we're now in sort of the next gen of that. Like you have Apple having building out their health ecosystem, like the new AirPods Pro 3 or 4, I think, has you can now kind of track, your heart rate with the AirPods alone. So I think they're brewing up something here. And I think, down the line, if an Aura or a Whoop were to acquire, I don't know, some biofeedback neurotech company that they can easily integrate to their Aura application, I think that would be something.
That Apple ecosystem of health is probably one of the most slept on features of the products, in my personal opinion. You were consistently
Exactly.
using it every single day. iPhones usually in the pocket. Headphones now stay on for like, I think it's up to 7 hours with the new ones, which means over the course of a day, plus the 10 hours battery life, you could look at like 14 hours worth of like headphone use, right? The amount of data that gets picked up there and then like plugged back into like, how do we optimize your life? This trend of optimization, how long do you think it lasts?
Oof, great question. I do think it's a generational thing. Um, if I can say, for example, other wellness trends or brands like Athletic Greens, right? They've really went on a hype for the past couple of years, and really great distribution as well. But I think that's the hard thing. The other aspect that's not really talked as much in wellness is that, you are targeting healthy subjects. So the margin of change that one sees between being healthy already to being healthier is not, you don't feel it maybe as much consciously, unless you have an Excel that tracks your everyday HRV or whichever, um, and really focus on the metrics and the numbers. That makes sense. But I think as a feeling, it's hard to really have it be sticky. So how do we make it sticky? I think a lot of digital health or health products have been quite digital or virtual. I do think physical engagement and a physical space is a differentiator within health tech these days. So you have, I mean, we've invested in one that we're quite excited about in London over the summer. So still stealth, but they're building around the concept of within that. It's a physical space. It's sort of the concept of four space, right? Um, First space is the home. Second space is work. Third is, cafes. You have this booming
What?
cafe
Hold
culture
on.
that originated.
Fourth space. I thought third space was the end of the spaces.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the concept that there's a fourth one, which is hard to really, it's hard to imagine what that could be if you were to explain it to someone that's sort of like, huh, there's only a third space, which is a cafe or
Yep.
a gym or whichever. But this is essentially now brewing to be, a concoction of all those things. So still TBD, but the idea of really changing the way we as patients or consumers look at there's still a gap. I think it still feels clinical for us to sort of sit here, wonder what our hormonal levels are, how's our blood levels doing. Like it's still an effort to go to a clinic, even if it's a tech enabled one or something like that. I think there's still that gap that hasn't yet been filled, and again it's a behavioral thing that pushes one to do that as well.
Does I thought, wow, Jesus Christ, fourth space. My brain is ticking with questions because like the third space was supposed to be for community, right? That's why we ended up going to the coffee shop. The first place is the home, the second place is the work, the third place is like where we can be ourselves outside of those two contexts. What does this fourth space look like outside of, again, another space for community, another space for meeting people? Like, is it the
Right.
optimization of health? Or is it
It's
more than that? Is it that plus passions plus, hobbies that we like?
I would say it's more than that. And at the moment, I mean, company's still early stage, but we kind of underwrote it, seeing that we think it's the best team to build something in community. Um, but essentially, it's the concept of, you have, let's say, you have your saunas, your cold plunges, then you
Hmm.
have your non-alcoholic drinks. You also have nootropics, or so, let's say bulletproof coffee. You have
Oh,
all
I
these
see it. I
aspects,
guess
right?
you need a place to like consume them.
It's yeah, exactly. It's a mixture. It's a concoction of all these wellness ideas and things. Like if you have to do your VO2 max, if you want to go for training and you stop by this place, so it's not necessarily, why should I go to? Why don't I just go to an Equinox or just go to my cafe here? It's sort of it's having everything under one shop.
Hmm.
Essentially, is the concept for it. So really having it so that, I mean, I think it's quite clever having, the mixture of functional beverages in the physical space as well, just because I think in general European culture, cafe culture, it started here. People consume caffeine quite on a normal basis, but instead of that, why not have a different approach to, having nootropics with your alternative coffee? That is also something we've explored. And then at the same time, perhaps there is a wellness sort of event with, let's say, investors. So it's a concoction of many things all in one.
That is super interesting. How much of that is like supercharged with the application of AI? And as we move into these next gen versions of wearables that we've discussed, like what Aura looks like in 5 years, what Whoop looks like in 5 years, as the band increases, maybe there's multiple elements to it. Like how does that play into a fourth space as well?
Yeah. And no, fair question on that regard, because I think at the moment it's centered, the concept of that and many and others that maybe are trying to get to that physical space is it's really community led, but the way that we're kind of seeing it, and I can kind of maybe go back into stretch how far product and UX and UI is so imperative to these things. Um, the one example I like to share is there's this one I might have shared with you prior, but it's an app called Finch, and it's a free app. Someone made, bootstrapped it in the US. It's sort of a self-care thing, like a Tamagotchi from the 90s. But they've managed to crack something emotional and personal from users, and they do like over 4 million per month. No VC backing or anything like that, but really nice sort of UI and user patient journey or consumer journey along the lines. I think that's something that has to be done also similarly to these, let's say, fourth space approaches in health. You know, having a check in, like if you have a Soho House membership, or you can, kind of check on folks that may be members as well. Being able to check in, like, let's say for a blood test, in that space, and then having everything sort of jotted in, connecting also maybe with, let's say if you're a health founder going to this, let's say for space, you connect with others. So it's really kind of, again, I can kind of spit out a lot of theoretical concepts that could be done here, but I think it's still, it's brewing in the early stages, and it's hard to kind of imagine what could this be like, because I also haven't heard of, that's why I got excited with their pitch of what is this for space, which is sort of TBD, but a mixture of physical, perhaps wearable, and of course the virtual aspect. Because I think the iPhone is an extension of our hands and our arms already. So easiest way for to connect with us and communicate with us.
How much of your investment research is you actually using these products on a daily basis? I'd love to understand, like when you start thinking about a space in the context of you, it feels like the overarching space is wellness and health tech. How much do you like get into the nitty gritties of like living with the products and like consuming the
Yeah,
products in some cases?
right. I mean, it kind of started back for me some time back when I was still in California. So I feel like in the 2010s, there was like a really small group of these, I don't know, biohackers in Los
Hmm.
Angeles, like Culver City. I used to do neurofeedback, which is basically, non-invasive. You just place EEG or these sensors on certain parts of your scalp. It just measures your brain activity essentially. You can do a test, want to get an EEG prior, see how your brain activity is actually going, and then you can kind of presume and say, oh, okay, then there's overactivity in that certain part of the brain,
Hannah,
so
you
that
should
means
have told me this in advance. I would have put the strapline as Hannah the Biohacker Villa.
oh gosh, yeah, I hope. I wish I was that. That's sort of my spirit animal, is to be as healthy as I think in my head. Um,
And so, what
but yeah,
you
no,
use you use VC as a way of figuring out where to and what to invest in, so that you could go and live that life.
Exactly, just like Brian Johnson, right? But instead of the founder route, I'm going about it in the VC route. Um, but no, yeah, I mean, I've sort of dabbled with neurofeedback back in the days, and it's typically, and that's the interesting bit. I think that's what I'm also waiting for now. So
Hmm.
you have everything in our arm, but there hasn't been anything on the scalp or the head yet. And there's some neurotech companies that are doing quite well and are popping up that we're seeing, and a lot of other health investors I engage with daily discuss this. But it's non-invasive. You can check your brain activity. Are you feeling foggy? What do you need to do to basically, improve cognition in sort of ways? And on top of that, you do that every day, 30 minutes max. Um, you then take in, let's say, another nootropic that improves your focus and cognition in general. And then you have, if I don't know if you remember the Bulletproof brand, which is essentially you have your coffee, you have your MCT oil, and some other high performative oil that you put in. And that used to be sort of my mix back then, but it was also influenced because of friends that are doing that back in those days. But mindfulness, yoga, meditation, all of that stuff. But it's propping up now, I think, sort of the new gen version of these things.
Okay. As we round out the show, we sort of get into this last part and this almost lightning round of questions, right? It's like just quick fire off the top of the dome. For you, which one of these specific areas are you really bullish on? Is it, health tech? Is it nootropics? Is it the fourth space? Is it, Neuralink style hardware?
For me, I think it's the idea of the sports space. It's sort of the midterm that you can capture already from the VC aspect of things. Neurotech and neuroscience in general, I think one of the latest frontiers of science that we haven't yet cracked. I think one that excites me, of course, the big names that stand out, Neuralink, that's actually, invasive, that helps paraplegics to those that want to improve their depression. So there are many things mental health, severe mental health wise, that haven't been addressed just because the brain in general is one of the hardest things to essentially um, sort of wrap our heads around on. I would say that sort of is the first thing that pops in my head.
How bullish are you on on the like glasses wave that we're about to have for health tech?
Yeah. And do you mean also sort of like the meta glasses that Zuckerberg had shared? Um, to be frank, also that's been around for quite some time, and it gives me the feeling of similarly to when virtual reality and AR have also been around for quite some time. So either people, consumers, are not ready to have that consistently. I mean, we're people are already complaining about being, sort of, I guess you're filled with screens in front of you all the time, your phone, the laptop, a big screen. And now you have glasses that are essentially like a mini screen again. So I'm wondering if there might be friction with behavioral use for it. Um, but I do think it's probably a smart way for Zuckerberg to essentially, pick up as much real world data for the metaverse that he's still probably, planning to build. But there are some I think that are quite interesting. I know I'm forgetting the name of the company, but for example, tech CEOs use it, like the Palmer Lucky or Lucky Palmer from Enduro. I think he was stating there is one glasses he used to essentially, it's like a script when he does presentations on screen. So there are those things, although I don't know how much it will capture the consumer market.
Last question before we let you go. One of the things that we love to ask VCs on the show is like, who's on your Mount Rushmore of venture? For you, who are the best investors that you've consumed in your life? You've read about their work, the bets that they've taken over their lives.
Yeah. Jokingly enough said I would obviously say our fund. Our
It
founding
can't be.
partners of our fund,
It cannot be self noms.
of course. Um, but in general, I listen to a lot of I mean, I think this is probably the big note for VCs, Roelof Botha from Sequoia.
Hmm.
Just in general, reflective investor. And the way that he runs the fund in general is really well intentioned and thought through. And again, he's sort of molding the typical, let's say, Sequoia investor, and not just, based on individual prowess, but of course, having them think the way that he was modeled from Don Valentine and so forth. So I think from that, but I mean, there are many others as well. Bill Gurley, of course, is another one that's sort of a legend in that regard. But those are the ones that, kind of popped in my head as you asked.
Okay, maybe not the last question, but this will probably be the last question. What's long-term goal look like for Hannah? Is it run a fund? Is it just sail off into the sunset and just continue working on wellness? I'm super curious.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
I'm
one,
sorry, just for
yeah,
clarity, like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what are the incentives? Because
right.
you get exposed to so much, like some of the best technology on the face of the planet. You get deeply entrenched with some of the founders. You either go one or two ways: continue in the fund,
Yeah,
keep deploying capital, and like working with the best, like best in class, or at least trying to. And the flip side is like, I get the itch and let's go build.
right. I mean, I would say for me, getting my journey to venture is not the sort of traditional direct path. And I think it led me to this space now or industry now after a slew of many sort of redirects in my career path in life. So having done clinical work, also academic research, and then tinkered with sort of the operating hat within startups, I really do like the venture side of things. I don't know if I'm having the itch yet to operate and build something of my own, but also the cadence and the relationship I have with the current fund with Vowerk that I'm in. I really do love it. Great team in general, sort of valuable thesis that we all kind of can cater to. But one can never know down the line. Who knows? Maybe also starting up a new fund on my own and some other investors. I mean, this is sort of a topic that's discussed. And again, I can emphasize the concept of community. Like female investors have a great community from my experience. And there are, of course, others that are brewing the concept of starting up their own, or maybe perhaps connecting with another female investor to do something. So there are those options as well. So it could be quite, there's a slew of things maybe,
I think
but TBD.
Villa Ventures has like a nice ring to it. If you can catch my drift.
Villa Capital, yeah,
Oh, Villa
exactly.
Cap. That's a nice one. But does it have to be Cap? Can we not just call it something different? You're not just deploying capital.
True. Exactly. So I don't know, some random number that is associated with something that makes it sound cooler, maybe that I could do.
So, oh God, we can't do A16Z because that's just done.
No, exactly,
Find
exactly.
like some wellness hack and like the numbers that sit between that. Hannah, this has been awesome. I got to get you back on again soon. Thanks so much for the time.
Yes, always a pleasure. Thank you.